on to the evaluation seminar. We're going to record the meeting so people that missed it can get it later. And you should have just seen a pop-up on your screen. If you want to take your picture off, you can do that. I'm the Toastmaster, and our evaluation seminar is going to be organized as follows. I'm welcoming everyone, and hopefully it's great to find out where you're from, and you can chat with us in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that. We're going to have the main speaker, Alan Supynuk, from about 1:05 to 2 o'clock. Then the test speaker is Randy Salmonen, and he's going to give us a 5 to 7 minute speech. At 2:07, we're going to go over the breakout room session. You'll each be assigned to a breakout room that will have a facilitator. And right now our facilitators have put numbers next to their names. I'm a facilitator, Kathy's a facilitator, Tracy's a facilitator, and Nate is a facilitator. And Alan will be one if we have a lot of people. Then we're gonna have a break. So while you're in the breakout room, you can talk to each other and the facilitator and work on an actual evaluation that's based on the test speaker you just heard. You're going to come back to the main room at 2:35, so that gives you a good 20-ish minutes to work on your evaluations and to discuss them in the breakout rooms. At 2:35, Alan is going to take over the end of the meeting, and we're going to share, and it's going to be a discussion and a summary. So without further ado, I want to welcome anybody who just came in, but my time right now would be to introduce Alan Supynuk, who's going to be the main presenter for this evaluation seminar. And thank you for joining us today, which is a Sunday, January 9th. Alan Supynuk has a DTM after his name, and he's been in Toastmasters at least 7+ years. He's actually earned 2 DTMs, given over 500 speeches, over 1,000 speech evaluations. And this afternoon, he's going to remind us of the 3 parts of an evaluation and which are most important. Alan is also going to give us many aspects to consider when evaluating and how to express them. We're going to talk about evaluation contests, which this is particularly timely because the spring contests are coming up, and one of them is an evaluation contest, at least in our District 31. Alan's also going to talk about different unusual formats when you present your evaluation. I'd like you to put your hands together and welcome warmly Alan Supynuk to the stage, the virtual stage. Welcome, Alan.
Welcome, everyone. I'm just delighted to be here today. I'm a huge fan of the evaluations at Toastmasters. I also think it carries over into your personal life. I use it at work all the time, and I've had people come up and say, I've used some of these techniques in our evaluations with my significant other, and I've been trying to get them to take the garbage out every week. And instead of just nagging them, I'd go up to them and tell them several things I noticed they're doing really well. And then I'd say, hey, by the way, would you mind being a little bit more regular with garbage? It's really important that we get that out there on time and not have to scramble at the last minute. And then say something else to them, supportive, and bam, all of a sudden they're taking the garbage out and they don't need reminders anymore. I mean, this stuff works. Toastmasters amazes me, full stop. I've always been amazed, even in the days of the old problem. I'd always say that when people got to their 10th speech, their inspirational speech, I never once heard a bad 10th speech, not once. And then I realized I'd really never heard a bad 4th or 5th speech. I mean, people start Toastmasters at all kinds of different levels. And by 3 to 5 speeches in, they're giving really good, strong speeches. And by 10, they're giving excellent speeches. I mean, what's up with that? How does it something work that well? Where else in your life do you go and in 10 steps, you have some level of mastery of a subject? It's really amazing. And I think a lot of that comes down to the evaluations. And before we launch into the main presentation, what are the 3 steps we talk about all the time in evaluations? The Oreo cookie method, right? It's a little hard to do the interactive. Let me go ahead. You say there's some things the person did well, some things they could improve on, and then motivate them to give the next speech. And I'd like to refine that. I'd like to say you want to give 5 to 7 things or multiple things that they did well. At most 1 or 2 things that they can improve. At most 2, never more than 2, unless they're 2 tiny ones and a bigger one, but rule of thumb 2. And the third one, motivate them to give another speech. And I've had people come up to me afterwards and they say, I don't get it. Why do we spend time telling them what they're doing well? Why don't we just give them the most important thing, which is number 2, how they can do better next time? And did you ever think about it? Like everywhere else you've been, job evaluations. I just had my first yearly evaluation on a new job. And usually they come in and they just blast you with, here's what you're doing wrong and here's what we want to see you doing better. And barely mention anything that you do well. And how do you feel after an evaluation like that? Demoralized. They could give you a double bonus and a 10% pay raise, but you're walking out there thinking of the things that they said you did wrong. It seems like an insane way to talk to your employees once a year. The single most important conversation of the year, and most people walk out of it demoralized and devalued. Doesn't seem right. But in Toastmasters, our evaluations, you walk out of them, if they're done well, you walk out of them feeling energized. And for a long time, I preached to people, look, out of the 3 things, the most important thing is that number 1, you tell them 3 to 5 things they're doing well. Because then you're saying, there's a couple things there. One is you're establishing credibility with them, right? You're saying, hey, I noticed you did this well, and this well, and this well, and this well. And they say, oh, this guy's an expert. He's an astute judge of character. He noticed those things I'm doing well. And then when you say, here's 1 or 2 things you can do better. Well, here's somebody that's invested in me and sees everything I'm doing well. He must be wanting to make me be better. So now those 2 things land differently. They land as something that from somebody who's trying to make you feel better. So those 3 to 5 things establish your credibility with the person you're talking to and make the other 2 things more likely to be listened to. But it goes deeper than that. We all speak really well, and if we just get told the 2 things to change, sometimes what we do is we change those 2 things and we break something that we're doing well. And that's what they say about 2 steps forward, 2 things we ask them to change, and 1 step backwards. I fixed 2 things, but I broke something. So by having our evaluation start out saying, hey, here's all the things you're doing really well, and reminding them of that. And then when you tell them the 2 things to switch, they say, okay, switch these 2 things, but don't change any of those others. And so now it's 2 steps forward and hopefully no steps backward. All of a sudden, does it make sense that you progress at least twice as fast in Toastmasters as you do anywhere else? So I went from, I think we all started there. Number 2 is the most important. So then I thought, no, number 1, that's the most important thing. And I thought that for 5 years. And then one day I had a revelation. I've seen evaluations occasionally go badly, or a Toastmasters meeting go badly, and someone walks out of there and their feelings are hurt and something went wrong and they never come back again. Think about that. They went to a Toastmasters meeting, they invested enough to join and give a speech, and then something about that evaluation or something about that meeting caused them to quit and never give a speech again. If that happens, does it matter what you did at number 1 and number 2? No, you wasted your breath. So that third thing, which is to say something positive about their speech, something that says, oh, I'm just dying to hear you come back and give another speech. That motivation to sign up, to walk out of that meeting and sign up for their next speech, that's the most important of the 3. And I found that to be a really interesting journey, going from out of 3 things, this is the most important, to this is the most important, to this is the most important. That motivation for next speech. And often we just throw it away sometimes and we say, I can't wait to hear your next speech, something casual like that. Better than not saying anything at all. And we'll see in the seminar today, maybe focus on that being the most important thing that you say in your evaluations. Just something to think about when you're up there, because when you're, especially in an evaluation contest, you're thinking, oh, I've got to be the one that figures out the right things, the right corrective things for their speech. That's the most important thing I can say. I don't know, do you judge, taking contest, you're at the mercy of the judges, so it depends how they're feeling, but I think day in, day out for your evaluations, how to improve their speech is the least important thing that you're going to say to them. That's my thoughts. Just going to check. Yeah, and welcome everyone. So let me start the formal presentation, and then we've got a couple of things to go through afterwards as well. But let's just get through this. And there. Is everyone able to see this? So these are slides from a person named Halim Syed. It's a Toastmaster that I worked with when I was at MathWorks, and he rose up to the district level. And I gave what I felt was the best presentation. He didn't win. Like I said, contests are, you're at the mercy of the judges and everybody feels a little bit different. But he went a long way, and he's made it up to the district level several times in his years as a Toastmaster. He's a really strong presenter. He's really into Toastmasters, does a lot of research. He's read 20, 30 books on Toastmasters and evaluations and really invested in this. And I want to thank him for giving me permission to use these slides, because I think he's got a really important message. I'm going to show you the way he used to give evaluations that would get him up to the district level. Okay. Later on, we're going to talk about other formats you can use, but consider this as your go-to format for giving evaluations. So we've got some definitions here. We're going to talk about effects and tools. And we're going to start out with the structure of your evaluations. So this is Freytag structure for plots and in movies and books and things like this. It's from a blog by Dave Oppegard, and he's a well-known screenwriter, for TV and movies. And he says, every time you're presenting something, you want to have some kind of structure. And there's many ones that you can start with, but really you want a range of emotion out of your presentation. And he suggests that this could be your go-to one. You start out, at some level, you build to a climax, and you come down, and then you finish off. But you see that range of emotion that goes through your speech and goes through your evaluations. All right. That's something I'm guessing probably most of you never even thought about when you're doing your evaluations. But if you're trying to have an evaluation that really hits home, you want to give it emotional impact. And it's the contrast between the low end and the high end that gives it the impact. If you just come in at the high end all the way through, it's really not as effective as starting at a lower emotional impact and building. So whenever you're speaking, giving a speech, giving an evaluation, it's both the content and the structure. If you're trying to do both of those things on the fly, it's a recipe for incoherence. You need to be thinking ahead of time, okay, what am I going to place in the low emotional impact? What am I going to place in the high emotional impact? And how am I going to structure it? So think of the things you want to say and then say, okay, which one has the most emotional impact? Okay, that's the one that goes at the peak, and the other ones go during the build. So this predetermined structure helps plan the journey you're going to give to the person you're presenting it to. It helps you deliver with confidence because now you know the structure's in there ahead of time, and it allows you to finish strong. So what I'm suggesting is you think about the structure, and remember, we talked about one that starts low, goes high, and comes back down again, but you could start high, go down low, and come back up again. There's many different structures that go. I gave you what I suggest is the default one, but pick one and go with that. And maybe when you're listening to a speech, you'll say, oh, that default structure doesn't go well. The kind of things I'm thinking of fit in a different structure, but pick your structure ahead of time and then fit everything, your content into the structure. Pick the structure first, then fit your content into the structure. And so for your evaluations, when you're talking about strengths, start at the beginning and they build up a little bit. Your opportunity for growth the next time, that probably brings it down a little bit, back to your starting point. And then there's this thing called an SC, which you're going to give at the end of your speech. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So for a contest level evaluation or for an evaluation in a club, consider 2 strengths, 1 opportunity, and this thing called an SC. Okay, we've talked a little bit about structure. Now we're going to talk about complete thoughts. So what is a complete thought and how long should it be? So a complete thought, I mean, if you were talking to a journalist, they would say what are the things you want to go into a speech? Who, what, when, where, and why, and maybe add in how. You know, the 5 W's and the how. But who is the person that's talking that gave the speech? So that's out of the question. Where is where they just were. When was just now. So those 3 come out. So the 3 things we're focusing on here are what, why, and how. And so everything you talk about, and now we're talking about the strengths and the opportunities, should have a what, a why, and a how. I'm going to do these in the other order because we talked about doing strengths first. So when you're talking about your strength, you identify what they did. Say, vocal variety. The speaker had excellent vocal variety today. That's what they did. And then you talk about why vocal variety is important. Now, if you've been a Toastmaster for 5 years or 10 years, you know darn well why it's important. But to someone who's just started out, or maybe someone's kind of might be a little bit lost on why it's important, tell them why. And you need to come up with your own way of telling it, but why you think it's important. But you know, vocal variety, the person had excellent vocal variety. Why is that important? Because it helps differentiate one sentence from the other. And when you're doing a dialogue, if you do a high-pitched voice for the more feminine and the smaller speaker and a low-pitched voice for the bigger or the more masculine one, it helps differentiate who's talking. And if they miss the word of who said something, your voice immediately identifies it. And maybe even keep a third voice, your normal voice, for any narration. So narration in your regular voice, high-pitched for one speaker and low-pitched for another one. And we immediately know by the pitch of your voice who it is you're talking about at the time. And then, you know, talk about the anchoring, you know, the high pitch, the low pitch, and whatever. And that tells them what they did, how they did it, and why it was important. When you're talking about an opportunity, maybe it's you want to talk about body movement. So speaker gave an excellent speech, but I felt they could have made better use of body motion. Yes, they used their voice to differentiate between speakers, but if they turned just 30 degrees one way when they were talking about one person and 30 degrees another way when they're talking about the other, it would be not only their voice, but we get a visual cue as well as who was talking at the time. And then maybe when they were talking as themselves or narration, you can even just lean out of the circle a little bit and we'll automatically know exactly what you're doing. And this will help us differentiate who's talking which time and make your story come through that much clearer. Now you can see when you're talking about strengths and opportunities and you're giving so much more detail, you can't get as much of them in. You know, if you're going to go through it really quickly, maybe you can get 3 to 5 in. But if you're doing it at a speech contest where you want people to really, really know, you know, your stuff, and you're only going to give 2 strengths and 1 opportunity, give all this detail. And for everything you're talking about, tell them what they did, why it's important, and how it's done or how you do it better. I will send this slide out to everyone who registered afterwards. Some of you might even be able to recognize where these things came from. If you have been in Toastmasters for a long time and did the Competent Communicator Manual, these are basically speeches 2 through 10 of the Competent Communications Manual. But what I liked about it is each one of them talked about a different thing that made your speech better. The organization of a speech. Why do we do that? To make your speech easier to follow. You have a clear beginning, middle, and end. And then also in the beginning, you say, I'm going to talk about this, this, and this. And in the middle, you say, here's my points about the first one. Here's my points about the second one. Here's my points about the third one. And when you're doing the end, you said, I talked about this, this, and this, and you give your conclusion. And so by the time you finished your speech, they've heard everything you've said. Each point you've said, they've heard about it 3 times, once to tell them it was coming, once to fill in the details on it, and once to remind them of it. And by the time you finish the speech, chances are they're going to remember all 3 of those really, really well. The other thing about organization is only talk about at most 3 things. Studies have shown that if you talk about 4 things, people only remember 3. So if you want to give a speech where people remember a random selection of 3 out of the 4 things you say, or 3 out of the 5 things you say, or 3 out of the 7 things, and by the way, it's probably 2 out of the 7, or 1 of the 7, or 0 out of the 7, go ahead and talk about more than 3 things. I strongly recommend never talk about more than 3 things. That could be something else you add to the list. And talk about the focus. Each speech should either be to inform, to persuade, to entertain, and inspire. And if you try to mix those purposes, you lose some clarity of message. I'm going to pause here for a second. We'll go through these a little bit more. But here's one of the things I'm suggesting about you as an evaluator, is you maybe take a list like this and you build on it over time. And you say, these are the things I'm going to talk about when I do an evaluation. And I'm actually going to think about these and practice these on my own. And so when I see somebody give a speech that needs vocal variety, I'm going to have some canned things that I talk about, something prepared, and I'm going to tell them, vocal variety is important, why vocal variety is important, and how you could have done it better in this speech. And just prepare that. And so if you're giving this for a speech contest, when you talk about vocal variety, you're going to sound super confident, super informed. But if you have enough of these things on your tool belt, I think of like Batman's tool belt, again, wearing a belt around it. And he's got a little compartment here with his batarang, and a little thing here with his bat shark spray, and a little thing over here with a line that he can use to climb up big buildings, and another thing that it does that gives him wings to let him fly. It's an amazing belt. You can develop your own amazing belt that talks about each of these different things, and you practice how you're going to talk about them. And so you can, when you talk about vocal variety, you're talking about it in a very compelling way that says what it is, why it's important, and how you do it better. And now you're setting yourself up to make really strong feedback on someone's speech. Inspirational speeches. Inspirational speeches, why do we give them? We're trying for an emotional impact, and the emotion makes the speech memorable. And anything you can do to improve the emotional impact, talk about how it felt to you, talk about the effect you saw it have on other people, saw about the difference it made in your community. Those kinds of things, that's what makes it memorable. So each and every one of these, and this vocal variety, there's 4 aspects to vocal variety. You could talk about all of them at once, but you might want to just pick 1 or 2 of them and talk about the vocal variety there. And for speech contests, I would pick 1 aspect of vocal variety for either a strength or an opportunity. Use of language, pick 1 aspect of these. The rule of 3, that's like clear, consistent concepts. The 3 words that start with things that sound the same. I'm using primary passing puppies. I never know which one of my dogs is going to pull in front of me first when I'm on a walk. These rules of three give you memorable sound bites in your speech. And I've seen evaluation contests won on memorable sound bites. The table topics, it's almost often won if you watch those things. The person with the best sound bite during their table topics is usually the winner of a table topic speech. But these are all things to think about when you're doing evaluations. Anyone got any other ones or any ones that they'd like me to talk about here? All right.
Alan,
Yep.
when I give an evaluation, I try to remember specific items from the actual speech that the person talked about so that I can show I was listening, but I can bring them up again in terms of what they did well or something like that. Is that helpful to pinpoint it?
It is, but when you're talking about something that they said in the speech, you can do it in two ways. You have a little bit of filler between the strengths and the opportunities, as well as in the SC. So you can mention it there, which shows that you're listening. But the other time you want to try to use them is use them in an example in here. For example, if you're talking about vocal variety, you had that delightful joke that your uncle told, but if you use a different voice for your uncle and the person he was talking to, that would have made who was talking at each time more memorable, and it'd be easier to laugh at the joke because you'd know who was saying what to who at each time. So I agree, giving examples from their speech is absolutely a great way to make it memorable and to show that you were listening. It'll make your evaluation land better. So very good. Thank you.
Alan,
Yes, go ahead, Jenny.
how do you incorporate humor into an evaluation, or should you?
Well, humor is excellent. Humor is a release of tension, right? So if you're comfortable doing humor, and the nice thing about this is this allows you to practice ahead of time and think, oh, if I say something like this in this way versus that way, you can try it a couple times and in different evaluations and see which ones get a better laugh. But these might allow you to prepare some of your humor in advance. There's some people like the late Robin Williams who seem to be able to do that on the spot, but I'm willing to bet even they were practicing these things furiously in their head prior to doing them on stage. And they also try these things lots and lots against smaller audiences. So here's a chance to try your humor, write some of these things in a humorous way for when you give them so that they do land better. A little bit of a release of tension helps what you're saying land better. Anyone else? These are great questions. One of the things I haven't talked about explicitly in here, one of the best practices I've always felt when you're giving an evaluation is to practice giving it in the third person. Even when you're giving examples from the speech, you can say, when someone uses vocal variety well, it makes the speech easier to follow along. For example, in today's speech, we heard a joke about his uncle told to my nephew. And if the person telling the story had used a deeper voice for the uncle and a lighter voice for the nephew and did the narration in their own voice, that would have helped keep this straight. And the nice thing about using the third person is everyone in the audience listening to it, it lands on them, because now you're not just speaking to the one person, you're speaking to the whole audience. And I also feel even the one person you're talking to, it lands better on them, because most of us are really uncomfortable hearing praise, right? And so when you talk about it being a third person, that is just, oh, this is what good people do. Oh, and you give an example of something that I did as being what good people do, rather than just being, this is something good that I did. It lands better. And it lands on the audience better, and it lands on the intended recipient better as well. Anything else? Anyone's got something that they don't see on this list? Yep, Lisa.
I just wanted to point out something that Jesse Welty mentioned in the chat. When you're using an opportunity during your speech to either make a joke or point out something, she said to not inadvertently target the speaker in a joke, but have it be your own, point it to yourself, or have it be overly general so that people don't feel singled out in your audience.
Excellent. Jesse, that's a great point. That's yet another, the nice thing about if you give your whole speech in terms of the third person, then you don't have to remember to do that just for when you're doing the humor. You're just doing that for everything in your speech. Yet another reason. Absolutely agree. And humor is a very personal thing. If you look at an audience, jokes land in, some parts of the audience think it's hysterically funny, and occasionally you see some parts of a joke that really insult somebody in the audience, and hard to predict ahead of time. But it is a very effective tool. Anyone else? Okay. So duration. You have 3 minutes and 30 seconds to give your evaluation. 210 seconds. And if you look at it, if you're going to give, we've talked about 4 things. Whoops, sorry. Oh, it's doing the build again. If you're talking about doing 4 things, 2 strengths, an opportunity, and this SC that we talked about, you really only have about 40 seconds each to do those. And that's the advantage of preparing these in advance, is you can time them in advance so that okay, when I'm talking about vocal variety, I've got this pre-canned speech that takes me about 40 seconds. That just tells me how much detail I can put in there. When I'm talking about body language, I want to have something that I can say in about 40 seconds. And that way you get 4 things that you can say in there. Notice you get, 20 seconds at the beginning to do some introductory remarks, a little bit of time to switch, 20 seconds to give some summary before you do this SC thing at the end. And, it all adds up. And that gives you about 40 seconds. If you do it this way, that gives you about 40 seconds to play with. And you need that 40 seconds. And you really, really want to have it. For one thing, if you're giving your evaluation in a contest, there may be applause. If you do a really good strength, people may applaud it. And that applause might take 5 or 10 seconds. And you can't talk over your audience out of respect. And so you gotta sit there and smile happily. You're happy they're applauding for you. That's fantastic. But you're on a time limit and they're taking away from your time. So you really want to be doing this in a way so that you're not pushing up against the 3 minutes and 30 seconds, because as you know, at a contest level, 3 minutes and 29 seconds, good. 3 minutes and 31 seconds, you just wasted your time, right? So That's the other thing about this method is you're trying to find 4 things to talk about, a little bit of stuff to tie in between them at the beginning and towards the end. And each one of those things should be about the same time. So knowledge base, concepts plus words. You're talking about your understanding of speech mechanisms. And that's what we were talking about on that slide. On that slide before. So you want to start collecting, here's things that I see people do, and here's how I express them. So if you want to become an excellent evaluator, over time, you want to start becoming a collector and an organizer. You want to take all these things you've heard about how to make a speech go better. And you don't want to just have a junk drawer where you, or a key drawer where you throw all these things into one drawer. Instead, you want to have this nicely organized toolbox that says, when I'm talking about the cadence part of vocal variety, here's what I say. I might adapt it and include an example of how they did it in that speech, but this is overall how I'm going to do it. And for body language, when I talk about how the body moves, here's another organized key that I have. And when I talk about the focus of the speech, was it an inspirational speech, an informational speech, an explanatory speech, or an entertaining speech? Talk about each and every one of them and think about the kind of examples you would fit in to your 40-second monologue on that particular thing. So for everything I want to talk about, any aspect I want to evaluate, what am I going to say? Why am I talking about that? And how is it that you do it? And have all that prepared ahead of time. Any questions on that? So this is a very formal method, but this was prepared by somebody who his goal was to win at the district level evaluation. And this is what he went through. He said, every time I talk about something, I want to have a very strong, coherent message. And so I'm just going to collect these things, and then you have a whole bunch of them. And then the speech you hear, you think, okay, here's 2 of them that they did well, and here's 1 they could improve on. Let me go with that. And so he's got an advantage that when he's listening to your speech, he's deciding which 3 of these tools he's going to pick up, but he's already practiced with all 3 of those tools. And now he just has to spend a little bit of time adapting each tool to the speech you just heard, figuring out which ones he's going to use. And then you can spend the rest of the time thinking about how am I going to get my emotional arc and how I'm going to lead into that and how am I going to lead into the rest. And he's spending more of his time on the structure and less of his time on exactly what he's going to say. And write it down. Get it down on a piece of paper so you can see it. The last thing, remember the thing we talked about as being the most important? His cut at it when you're trying to motivate them to give another speech. You want to give a sincere compliment. You can think other ways of doing it, and if you can think of other ways of doing it, fine, use what works for you. But I recommend you make this your go-to way instead of just throwing away, can't wait to hear your next speech. I look forward to hearing your next speech. Oh, this was really good. You always give good speeches. I can't wait to hear your next one. That's fine, but it doesn't sound that sincere, especially if all 3 evaluations end up for a club, all 3 evaluations end up with the same thing. That just sounds like something you say. You want to have something that lands on them. If you don't have a sincere compliment at the end, people can say your evaluation came off cold, or you're not a very charismatic speaker. Even if everything else was really good and on the money, you could lose it at the end. So you want to show that the person to feel that they've been seen, that they've been appreciated, and that you're acknowledging the good in the other person. So try to find some way of acknowledging who they are. Something you heard in their introduction, something you heard in the speech, what your impression is of them, acknowledge who they are. You're a caring, compassionate person who goes out and donates time to Habitat for Humanity, right? A unique quality that they have. I loved your speech on Habitat for Humanity because you showed how deeply you care about your human being, about other human beings, and that you have this skill as a carpenter that you can use to improve other people's lives. And you brought the two of those together in a way that really makes the community as a whole a lot stronger. And connecting with their message. After you're hearing your speech, I'm going to go out tomorrow and volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. You've convinced me that this is something that I need to do. Right? Who they are, what unique quality that they portrayed in here, and how it connected with you. And I'd say out of the three of those, that last one's possibly the most important. When I give speeches anyway, the thing I'm most interested in knowing is, how did my speech land on the audience? How did people connect with what I saw? Did they, it's just Alan nattering away about something, or wow, that really hit me. Alan really cares about his dog, or Alan really knows a lot about board games, or geez, he sounds like a fun person, or you told me something I just didn't know, and that's really interesting that you know all these abstract and trivial things about the universe. How did they connect with? Thank you. Anyone have any questions about this? I'm arguing this is one of the most important things you can give.
I have a question. Alan, does it matter the type of evaluation or the finesse, or I don't know what the word is, if the person is, if you're evaluating a beginner's type of speech versus someone who's very accomplished?
I don't think it matters for that. I think you always want to give this no matter what. The difference I usually do between a beginner speaker, I try to give more strengths and at most one opportunity to do better, and maybe even a softball one, like next time, if you could not glance at your notes a little bit, or put your notes in bullet points, where you can just glance down at them occasionally, something softball like that for a beginner, because the last thing you want to do is scare a beginner away. The thing I do for really strong speakers is for the opportunity, they may not have done anything wrong, and you might come across as petty if you try to say one of the things they did was wrong. So there are opportunity for improvement. I might say, here's an alternate way of doing that. You gave a dialogue between two people. You could consider leaving that dialogue out and talk about how that conversation affected the audience that was listening to that, and let people make up in their own minds what that conversation was. Sometimes talking around a hole, leaving a hole in your speech, actually delivers a more important message, something nuanced like that. And if you can say, hey, Alan, that doesn't sound like one of your practiced keychain things, you're absolutely right. But I have given that kind of message before. But, some other way they could have done some part of their speech, just so that they've got another way of doing it. Or say, here, that worked on a small audience. For a bigger audience, you might want to take your gestures, and their gestures were great, but make them even larger, so they could be seen on a large stage, something like that. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Anyone else with a question about this? All right, let's move on.
Alan, Jesse just put something in the chat
Sure.
about, well, you can read it, or
Actually, I can't from here.
okay. Thank you, Jesse, for contributing in the chat. He said the sincere compliment is a real challenge for me. I cringe a little inside every time I find myself saying the dreaded, I look forward to your next speech.
Yep.
I don't know what ILFTYNS means because I'm not
I look
versed.
forward to your next speech. It's an acronym.
Oh, thanks.
I was saying it can be challenging on two fronts. First, sometimes it can be challenging if you don't know the person very well, which is the case in an evaluation contest
Yep.
most of the time. And it can also be challenging if you know the person very well, because you're trying to bring something fresh to their evaluation that they haven't heard from you before. Sometimes you find yourself hammering the same refrain with the speaker, saying like, oh, well, you do this very well, you do this very well. But I think people are looking for places where they've grown, and sometimes it's easy to overlook those things.
That's an excellent point. Let's go back. So the nice thing about this is, it does give you a structure for doing this. So, and you can come across it two ways, as you say. If you're doing it for a speech contest, even if you know the person well, you really want to pretend, for a speech contest, because the judges may not know the person very well. So if you say something, it's like making an inside comment about them, and it may not land on the judges. So when you're giving your evaluation for a speech contest, you want to do it. If this is the first time I've seen this person, this first speech I've ever seen, how would I make the sincere comment in that case, right? So, it's just this little pigeonhole. This is all I can see of you, and try to put everything you know about them off to the side. So what did I find out about who you are as a person from the speech I just heard? What was my impression of who you are from the speech I just heard? What was the unique quality about you that I saw from the speech that I just heard? Even if your personal feeling is like that's nothing like who they are, in the real life they're a real jerk, but they came across as this fantastic humanitarian, if it sounded like this was a unique quality they have, give that unique quality. And how does this speech land on me? How did this speech make me feel? Well, now you're just speaking about your own personal feelings about the speech, and that's just getting in contact with yourself. Did I feel uplifted? Did I feel motivated? Did I feel inspired? Did I feel sad? How did this make me feel about their speech? And like I said, that's probably the most important thing people want to hear on a speech. How did this speech land on at least one person in the audience? Does that help you, Jesse?
Yes, of course. I think I was thinking more in terms of everyday evaluations, but in the context of a contest, absolutely pretend that you don't know the person as well as you might know them.
Right. So for the contest, but even if it's in a club where you know them, so acknowledging who they are as a person. So maybe you know that they've been working on their vocal variety. Like the second year I was in Toastmasters, I got close to the district director, and he'd been in Toastmasters for 30 years. And his goal for that year was to learn how to tell jokes in his speeches. And you'd think after 30 years in Toastmasters that there wouldn't be anything you could teach him. But that guy went from here as a joke teller to here within that Toastmasters year. And so if you know that about, say, I've known you for a long time, and I know that this year you're working on making your jokes land better. And I have to say that is the best I've ever heard you tell a joke ever. So now it's a directed contest. You're not saying, he's the best joke teller ever. You're just saying that on your journey, that's the best joke I've heard you tell, right? And the nice thing about that is you can say that to 3 people in a row and it still sounds sincere, because you're not saying, oh, you're the best. No, you're the best. No, you're the best. You're saying, that's the best I've ever heard you do, or that's among the best jokes I've ever heard you tell, that kind of thing. And the unique quality is I love the way you approach being better at humor, and you just work at it meeting after meeting, speech after speech. Every opportunity you get up there, you're practicing some aspect of being funny a little bit better. And I really got a lot of joy, and I laughed outright at part of your speech tonight, that kind of thing. So if you know them well, you can still tailor it to them. And since that makes it better, one of the issues I had when I was early in Toastmasters is I was in like 12 different clubs and became a DTM really quickly. And I found that when I was giving an evaluation, the things I said tended to matter more to the people than what anyone else said. And occasionally there would be other really experienced Toastmasters, and I'd make some flippant comment to them, which I meant as a sincere compliment, because I know you're really good, so you're someone I can tease about this because you're so strong. You'll know I'm kidding, and that I actually mean the opposite. And I'd find out 3 or 4 months later that they'd been licking their wounds and they'd been wondering what they'd done to insult me. And at that point, I profusely apologized. And I just got to the point where when I gave somebody a compliment, I had to make sure it sounded sincere, and it had to be, this is the best speech I've heard ever. And I just never, ever say that. And I cringe when I heard other people say this, this is the best speech I've ever heard you make. Or for someone who's been in Toastmasters for the length of time you are, that's an amazing progress. Or, something nuanced so that you can say it in a crowded room to one person and say something similar to somebody else in a crowded room, and they don't both feel like they're, being bamboozled. That your compliments have no meaning because you just say them to everybody, right? So the more nuanced you can make your compliment, it sounds like you're making them weaker, but you're actually making them stronger. If that helps. Anyone else? Okay. So as we talked about deciding on the structure. I'd recommend for the next little while, you just go with the structure we've given, start out slow, grow a little bit, pull them back with your, with your two strengths, pull them back a little bit with your opportunity, and then try to really knock them out of the park with your sincere compliment. That's your structure. Give complete thought, say, this is what you did, this is why you say things like this, and this is, the things you did that made it better, or this is how you would do this well. For your knowledge base, go out and start collecting these things. Let me start looking at vocal variety and aspects of vocal variety and figure out how to articulate a message about vocal variety, and then just store that away. Come down with a 40-second way of describing that bit of knowledge base. And then you can start collecting those, and you can start with the list I gave you, but you can add a list of other things, and you can be the guy that talks about something that nobody else talks about. That's a great strength. Or you can talk about someone who talks about the basics, but talks about it in a way that makes your message really, really land. And that's what you want with your knowledge base. And this coming up with sincere compliment, it takes a lot of practice. We are not used to complimenting the people around us. It's really hard to do, but the better you do it, the more effective you'll be. And the more you motivate people to come and give their next speech, the better you are as an evaluator. That matters more than anything else you say. Whether it wins you the evaluation contest or not, that's the most important thing you're doing up there as an evaluator. And I'm going to leave that summary slide for when we get back. We're now at the time to break out into different rooms. So what I'd like you guys to do, we've got 4
Alan?
facilitators. Yep.
Oh. We need to let Randy give his test speech.
Oh, yeah, we will.
Okay.
Sorry. We're going to have someone give a test speech, and we're going to break out into different rooms and give you each a chance to do this, and you'll get a little bit of feedback on how you did it. I'd like you to think while you're in those rooms about anything that really caught your ear or caught your eye, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do a little bit of a wrap up, and talk about lessons learned, and then at that point I'll give you the evaluation. I'm going to stop sharing there. And I'm back here, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Randy Solomon, the wondrous Krueger National Park. The wondrous Krueger National Park, Randy Solomon.
Thank you, Alan. I just need 1 minute to bring up my PowerPoint.
Yep.
Do you enjoy Mother Nature? Fresh air, landscapes, mountains, lakes, oceans? The world is an amazing place, and it really should be appreciated. Throughout my travels, I've sought areas where I could freely bask in the beauty of my scenic surroundings. A lot of those places where I found abundant marvels were parks, local parks, state parks, national parks. Fellow Toastmasters, esteemed guests, today I'd like to share with you some of my insights and experience with national parks of the world. National parks have been around since the 1700s and are found in most every country in the world. The common idea of a national park is that it's an area designated by and administered by the government for the purpose of conservation of wild nature for posterity and as a symbol of national pride. Can you guess what park was the first park in the United States? If you guessed Yellowstone, you are correct. Yellowstone is largely in Wyoming, and it's known for its wildlife and its many breathtaking geothermal features, including Old Faithful Geyser. In the US today, we have 62 different national parks. Would you happen to know which one of those is closest to us that are in Massachusetts? Acadia National Park in Maine. If you haven't been, you absolutely should go. But be aware that it's a good 5-hour drive to get there, and there's a lot to see and explore. So plan on more than just a weekend trip. Worldwide, there are over 4,000 national parks, and several of the top 10 are in Africa. One of the top 10 is in South Africa, Krueger National Park. My most recent travels took me to South Africa, where I had the opportunity to spend a week at Krueger Park. I've been to many of the parks and reserves in South Africa, but Krueger Park absolutely dwarfs them all. Krueger is known for its natural beauty, but its biggest claim to fame is its wide assortment of wildlife, including many endangered species. Krueger is a fairly large park. It's roughly the size of Massachusetts. And there's a number of ways to experience the park. You can go on a guided safari with a park ranger in an open air, oversized Jeep. The advantage to this is that the ranger is an excellent source of knowledge and will point out and give you info on the game, as well as trees, plants, and other natural things. You can also self-drive through the park. There are a few paved roads, but it's mostly dirt and rough terrain, so you can't go everywhere if you don't have the right type of vehicle. The pros of self-drive is that you can go where you want, when you want. There's different areas and different terrain in the park, and those are home to different animal species. Luckily, my wife didn't see how close that elephant was. She has this irrational fear of them. I really don't understand why. There are lots of lodges within the park where you can stay, and if you get an opportunity to do this, I really recommend it. Of course, there's no walking freely in the park because much of the animal life is deadly. Every year, there are fatalities brought about by people that didn't respect the seriousness of this rule. On this trip, I had the opportunity to do a hot air balloon safari. And this gives you an aerial view of the park and allows you to visit places where there's no other access. Krueger is home to the Big Five. The African Big Five includes the lion, buffalo, leopard, elephant, and rhinoceros. These 5 prestigious large animals of Africa are a symbol of national pride. The only one of the 5 that I missed on this trip was the buffalo. The rhino that I saw on this trip had had their horns cut off. Poachers take the horns from rhinos, but these rhino horns were taken by park rangers to prevent them from being taken by poachers. Poachers will kill the animal for its horn or tusk if it's an elephant, whereas the rangers sedate them to take it. Poaching put the rhino on the very edge of extinction not too long ago. But places like and including Krueger Park are largely responsible for their repopulation. There are many wondrous natural spectacles to behold on planet Earth, and many of them are preserved by national parks. It's our privilege to be able to visit these rarities and marvel at their beauty. Some, like Glacier Park, where the glaciers are melting due to global warming, can no longer be preserved and are experiences that future generations will never be able to fully enjoy. Now that I've shared some details, hopefully you've been enticed enough to consider visiting a national park for the first time or again and sharing one of these miracles of nature. Thank you. Back to you, Alan.
Everyone. I hope you found the breakout sessions informative. Anyone like to lead off with is there anything you found surprising about either the session or something surprising that happened in your breakout room? Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
In our breakout room, we evaluated different things. We each picked up something different, which is
Excellent.
I think really observant of what people see and what they pick up on in a speech.
Now that was interesting. Can you give some examples of the kind of things that people found?
I found that I enjoyed his pauses because it made the speech more clear. And I also liked that he asked the questions. And my gift to him was going to be using gestures because I didn't see any gestures. Jenny thought the slides were too busy and too much, and he could have used less slides. But he loved the fact that at the beginning of the speech, he had no technical difficulties. And then Tyler thought that the speech could have been more on one national park rather than all of them. But he did a great job with the technical too, and how the slides went through.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Tracy, Lisa, Nate, yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Well, in our breakout session, we focused on Randy's ability. Jesse pointed out that Randy was using technology for his speech in a way that isn't used that often in a Zoom format. A gift might be for Randy to give the speech standing up, because the background pictures and the facts as he was discussing them were very clear and poignant. And Jesse actually mentioned that he thought it was nice in terms of an unusual way to start the speech with a blank background, and that Randy's attire was complimentary during the whole speech, but I
Oh.
guess some people had to move Randy's figure in different places so they could see the whole picture. Jesse thought maybe if there was a void in the corner of the slide in the same place, that Randy would have not covered up something in during the speech, and that having more fun in the speech might have been when Randy was talking about the park ranger, to use a different tone of voice or sort of act as if he was a park ranger. And the question and answer, that's a little tough because Randy was asking questions and answering them, and I'm not sure we wouldn't have had a chance to be that interactive with the answers, but sort of pretend that you're in the audience. And I'd have to say that the closing surprised us. It came on really fast without any preamble or a way to
Yeah, cool.
not have it be like
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Okay.
Tracy, what did you find in your session?
Elke and I, we talked about the structure of being able to do this evaluation and broke it down into each of the pieces. And we both really enjoyed the vivid, colorful pictures that were in the presentation. And the fact that some of them were very transformative. That was a word Elke used, is that especially the one with the eagle with Yosemite Park, found that she closed her eyes and it transformed her from sitting in her living room in the Caribbean to going to the national park and actually she felt like she was there. I thought that was a beautiful compliment to be able to create that opportunity for someone to be whisked away into a beautiful national park. And
Excellent.
I really liked the picture of the elephant on top of the car and the humor that brought out in the whole speech, that in creating that idea of his wife being afraid but didn't know why. And then there was that elephant on top of the car. And then we all knew why, because that's a possibility according to the picture. Something else that was beautiful was the tone, that he used nice tone with his words, and it drew you in to the story and to the parks. And so we both enjoyed that. And I'm just reading here. I think something that maybe he would want to work on would, the feeling that I was getting is, how can I help these endangered species? How can I be a part of that? And perhaps finding a way to call us to an action where we can actually help these parks remain around for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren to enjoy for years to come.
Excellent. Nate, anything from your session? Nate? Okay.
I'm not sure what the deal is with Nate, but I was actually in Nate's session.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a quick comment or feedback. I loved his visuals with the pictures, and I did also get a good laugh out of the elephant on the car. That was a good sense of humor there, good point of humor. But I did find his vocal variety a bit lacking, in that there were points in which he could have emphasized things like, said more like, I don't know why my wife's afraid of elephants, or something like a little more inflection in his voice. And then when the elephant picture pops up, say, oh, now I know, or something like that, just to like drive from the point, but that was a very good effect he did with the elephant. But I think overall, I did like his visuals and his pace was nice and steady. It could maybe have been a little bit faster, and maybe to challenge him, a gift would be maybe to say if he could just maybe like focus more on what was happening.
Jim, you just cut out for me. Did he cut out for anyone else as well? Okay. I gotta love Zoom.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah. Well, I hope his connection warms up a little bit, but isn't that fascinating though? I belong to a couple of different advanced clubs and I recommend you all try one at some point because it's amazing when you get evaluated by different people that different people pick up on different things that you say. And there was a few common themes in there, but there was a lot of very, very different things that we heard. And it's not a right or wrong thing. Remember, we want to talk about things they did well, and some things land better for other people. So when you go around the room, what's a strength of some people is an opportunity to improve for another person. That's interesting to know in and of itself. So that's kind of here's a skill that's maybe could be stronger, or maybe it landed the way you want and you're comfortable with it. You have to decide your own goals as a speaker. And then all these different things you can hear about them. How about sincere compliments? Did any of those stick out in your mind as to? Yep, go ahead, Kathy.
Our group talked about how we love the fact that he talked about the animals and it hit us and it made us feel like connected to him because we all love the animals and the screen and the shots.
Can you
So it made
just
us
pause it
feel
for a
like,
second? Yeah, pause it. Randy, how does it make you feel when you hear something like that about your speech?
As far as being connected, is that what you mean?
Well, no, just when someone says something like that about your speech, how does that make you feel?
I enjoy the feedback. It's you put time and effort and heart and soul into your speeches, and it's really nice to hear what people thought of it. And I especially love, getting the helpful hints that can help to make me better for the next opportunity.
Yeah, but I mean, I was going to ask about that as well. But how did that sincere compliment make you feel? Like,
Okay, so you mean as far as making them feel connected? That compliment?
Yeah, I mean,
yes, that certainly did feel like a genuine compliment, and as you said, not just I can't wait for your next speech type of thing. So it's very much appreciated, and it made me feel very good.
Good. Yeah, Tracy.
Yes, in my breakout room, it was made well aware that Randy practiced his speech and a number of times because it came across so clear and the tone was so good. And I wanted to share that it was very obvious that it just wasn't popped off, but it was well practiced.
Yeah. Great. And I imagine that landed well as well, Randy Wells. Anyone else sincere compliment they'd like to share? All right, we're winding down. There's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you see the value in this style and this value in collecting ways to talk about speeches and practicing them a little bit so that when you deliver them, your message sounded more coherent and more powerful. I'd like to talk about a little bit about strategies if you're in a speech contest, if any of you are planning to do. And the strategies matter more as you work up the level, but if you're if you're in a club where they give really strong evaluations anyway, you might have to struggle to stand out even in your local club. So doing it this way helps you stand out. You're going to give 3 really important messages and then a sincere compliment, and all that should help you be sound knowledgeable and credible and connect with both the speaker and with the audience, and in particular with the judges. But if you're trying to figure out, so they gave a speech, and I see 5 or 6 things that I could compliment them on, and 3 or 4 things that I could suggest for an opportunity, but I want to stand out among all the other evaluators. How do I do that? And so there's a little bit of strategy, and I just want to talk about things I've heard backstage at Toastmasters contests. And the feeling is, for you, the strengths, you may in your preamble want to, if the speaker had a couple of really obvious strengths, you might want to just mention them. He said, of course I could talk about his vocal variety or the quality of his slides. Those are very obvious strengths, but I'd like to talk about, and you want to pick something that you think is maybe 3 or 4 down the level, because you're trying to pick something that the other evaluators don't. So you want to tell the judges that you saw the other thing, and then talk about things that are a little further down so that your evaluation stands out. If you're the only one that talked about them doing something, you're going to stand out as a different kind of evaluator from the other people. You still have to do it in a strong way, but maybe don't pick the 2 most obvious strengths, and maybe don't pick the most obvious weakness. 3 and 4 on the list of strengths, and number 2 or 3 on the list of weaknesses, and talk about those. So just so that you'll stand out. That's a strategy for winning, particularly at the upper level. It's just something to think about. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions about that? But if you, and again, even when you're talking about the opportunities for improvement, you could mention, hey, I noticed number 1 and 2 as well. So now you're coming up as, oh, here's somebody that this guy probably knows about the obvious things. He's talking about the less obvious things. He's somebody you want to go for more detailed information. So it's just, just. And then there's no question on that. The other thing I'd like to talk about is alternate styles of evaluation. And I don't want to dilute my main message too much, because I really feel that the format that I gave you is a really strong format, and I've seen it being used to get someone up to the district level in evaluations. But evaluations, you can also have fun with them. And so there's other things you can try doing, and I've experimented with all of them, and I've seen these styles work, distinguish an evaluator from other people. One method that I've seen is you give your evaluation in the same style as the speech you just gave. So you just try to mimic the style of the speech, and you give your evaluation kind of going over the same things that they talked about in the same order, but talking about one as a strength and one as an opportunity. And then when you finish, you give your sincere compliment. And that's just a different style of speech. It's showing that you were listening. It's showing your adaptability as a speaker. And it could make your evaluation stand out from all the rest. The other is you can give your evaluation in the form of a story. So turn your evaluation into a speech. You were walking down Broadway in New York City, and you came to Times Square, and there you saw something in, elephant straddling a car, and then you went a few blocks down to a different place and you saw something else, just an interesting way to do that. Some people use, pick an acronym and I'm going to skip by that one. Other people like the 3-2-1, 3 things that the speaker did well, 2 opportunities for improvement, and a motivation for the next speech. I think for a speech contest, you really want to showing more detailed stuff. And so I like this would be a 2-1-1 format, but there are other things to think about. If you're having fun giving an evaluation, it shows, and that helps. Other reminders, giving it in the third person is considered a best practice by many clubs. All the advanced clubs I go to, the ones I go to, both strongly recommend that format. Other advanced clubs don't. Your mileage may vary, but consider doing that. And then remember, out of the 3 things that you do, the opportunities for improvement are in my mind, the least important. The things that they're doing well is the second most important, and that sincere compliment, the thing that gets them to come back and give their next speech. I would argue that's the most important. Any questions? And otherwise I'm going to go to my summary slide. I see something in the chat. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, someone's saying it's regardless of your take on second or versus third person, that a lot of contests, if there's an unspoken assumption that you're going to give it in the second person. But
Third.
Second or third, yeah. Give it in the third person, yeah. Yeah. But the other thing, don't feel bad if you lose a contest, because it's human beings are involved, and you never know. You want to just give the strongest evaluations you can. And all right, let's go back to the and this did this once before. I love technology. You saw me go back and forth a dozen times. I haven't gone back and forth at all. And I'm trying to bring it to the front, and it won't. I'm going to give it one more try, and then we're just going to go without it. All right. I'm going to share my desktop. And from my desktop, I'm going to bring up Keynote. And then we're going to go down to there. So if you want to build a masterpiece, you must first master the pieces. And then I will send this out to the registered participants as well. You know, here's an overall format. Address the dignitaries, the judges, or the fellow Toastmasters. Give a brief roadmap about, I'm going to give you 2 strengths and 1 opportunity. Give your statement about the first one with your what, how, and why. The second one with the what, how, and why. The third one with the what, how, and why. Summarize that you talked about those 3 things. And then give the sincere compliment. And if you do that, maybe you too will make it up to the district level in a speech contest. And if you do it day to day, you might find yourself giving more effective evaluations. But I'd like to thank all of you for coming out today. I had a lot of fun. There were some great questions, a great dialogue. We're going to put together the recording of this and try to post it on YouTube, send you a link, and I will send you a post to some of the material I talked about here as well. But thank you very much. Have a safe Sunday.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Thank you for the training, Alan.
Thank you.